The morning sun bled through the dusty glass windows of a roadside diner just outside Amarillo, Texas. Inside, it was the same routine as every day. Smell of bacon grease, buzz of conversation, boots scraping on the faded checkerboard floor. But Ava didn't hear any of it. She just moved from booth to booth with quiet precision, her black slacks pressed, her white shirt tight at the sleeves as if holding something in. Ava was 33, black, worn in a way most couldn't see. She'd learned to move like silence, glide past judgment, and never make a ripple. But this morning, as she approached table 7 with a fresh pot of coffee, she felt the familiar chill, the kind that settled in when white men laughed too loud in the presence of a black woman they didn't know. The group was out-of-town contractors, loud, red-faced, boots on the seats like they owned the place. And as she leaned to refill the first cup, one of them smirked. "Hey, melted Barbie," he said. "Try not to spill. Wouldn't want us to look like you." The diner fell silent in a way that felt heavy. Forks froze mid-air. Nobody looked up. But Ava felt every stare that refused to meet hers. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just poured the coffee. Another man chuckled, nudging the guy beside him. Bet it was a meth fire, or maybe her man lit her up. The others laughed, the kind of laugh that made walls feel tighter. That stretched the air so thin, Ava could barely breathe. She adjusted her sleeve again, trying to hide what could never be hidden. The scars along her arm had stories no one ever asked to hear. Deep, jagged reminders of heat, dust, and screams far away from Texas. She turned, her back straight, her steps measured. Her hands didn't shake. Not yet. The manager peeked from behind the kitchen window, saw the scene, and disappeared like he'd seen nothing. Customers looked down at their plates, pretending eggs and toast were more important than a woman being stripped of her dignity in public. "Girl's probably used to it," one of them whispered. Ava reached the counter, placed the pot back into its cradle, and stared straight ahead. Her reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser looked tired. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Behind her, the contractors kept laughing. But Ava's focus narrowed. Her jaw locked. Her left hand, still holding the lip of the counter, trembled just slightly. Her knuckles white. Her eyes burning with everything she wouldn't say. She parked her old sedan behind the diner every morning, 10 minutes early. Just like clockwork. The same faded blue car. The same silence. Ava didn't listen to music on the drive. Didn't check her phone. She just stared out the windshield until her hands stopped shaking, then reached for her sleeves. Every morning began the same way. Cover the scars. Tuck the past. Long sleeves, even in summer. Buttoned to the wrist. Not because she was ashamed of what happened, but because she was tired of what people thought happened. Inside, she tied on her apron and clocked in without a word. The younger waitress behind the counter always offered a pitiful smile. The cook, Luis, grunted, "A morning!" No one ever asked how she slept. No one ever asked why her eyes looked heavy even after 8 hours off. She preferred it that way. Silence meant safety. Years ago, she'd worn a different uniform, army fatigues, boots in sand. Back then, people listened when she spoke. Back then, lives depended on her voice. Now, she brought bacon to table 3 and refilled coffee for old men who never looked her in the eye. Ava kept her medals in a shoebox under her bed. A Purple Heart. A bronze star. A letter from a commanding officer that still had dried blood on the corner. None of that mattered here. In this town, in this diner, she wasn't Sergeant Ava Brooks. She was the black waitress with scars and no husband. Even the kids stared. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the fridge door near the kitchen. Tight ponytail, pressed shirt, and just a hint of the burned tissue creeping out from her collar. She'd tug the fabric up quickly, but it didn't matter. People always stared like they were solving a puzzle. Accident? Abuse? Drugs? No one ever guessed war. In truth, the scars weren't the worst part. The silence was. The way everyone let cruelty slip by like spilled salt. The way her co-workers never said anything when the men at table 7 got loud. The way her manager gave her extra shifts to make up for it, but never said why. They didn't know about Iraq. They didn't know about Ramadi, about the day she shielded a bleeding soldier while shrapnel tore through her left side. She could still hear the blast some nights, still feel the heat and the smoke and the weight of a body under her arm. But here, none of that mattered. Ava was the background, the help. She wasn't someone to ask questions about. She was someone to look through. That morning, as she wiped down the counter and set the salt shakers straight, her sleeves slid down again. She didn't bother pulling them up. What was the point? She didn't want to be seen. She just wanted to be left alone. But deep inside, a pressure had started building. It wasn't rage. Not yet. But it was getting close. The next morning started the same way. Ava walked in 10 minutes early, tied her apron, clocked in. She didn't expect much. Just another day of quiet disrespect and second glances. Maybe a few regulars. Maybe an extra tip if someone felt guilty enough. She was tired, but steady. That's how she survived. But the air shifted the second she saw them. The same group of white contractors from yesterday, already seated, boots kicked up, coffee half poured. Ava's chest tightened. Not from fear. Not anymore. From the knowing. From the way the day was already marked. "Look who's back," one of them said, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Thought we'd scared her off." They all laughed. She walked over, notebook in hand, expression neutral. No smile, no anger. Just focus. But before she could speak, the man with the red baseball cap leaned forward and said, "Frankenstein's back on the clock. Better check if the eggs are flame retardant." His friends burst out laughing, slapping the table. Ava's hand didn't move. Her voice didn't break. She just asked flatly, "What'll you have?" One of them grinned, his eyes trailing down her arm. "Whatever you recommend, hot plate. Just keep those crusty fingers off my toast." She took the order, word by word, without blinking. No one said anything. The trucker at the counter flipped a page in his newspaper. The young mom with 2 kids kept her eyes on her phone. The manager stepped out from the kitchen, caught the tension in the room, and turned right back in. Every table heard it, every customer felt it, but no one moved. As she turned to leave, one of the men called out, "Hey, did your face melt before or after your man left you?" Laughter again. This time even louder. Unashamed. Like she was a joke with legs. Ava stopped mid-step. She didn't turn around, just closed her eyes for half a second. From a nearby booth, a small white boy, maybe 5, maybe 6, looked up from his pancakes. His voice broke through the echo of cruelty. "Lady," he asked softly, "did it hurt?" A hush settled. Ava turned to him. Her face didn't change, but her eyes softened. "Not as much as being forgotten," she said. The boy didn't understand, but his mother looked up sharply. Her expression shifted, the first flicker of awareness passing across her face. Behind her, the men kept snickering, but it sounded thinner now, weaker. Ava walked to the counter, poured herself a glass of water with a grip that wouldn't quite let go. The laughter was fading, but the damage was done. Again. She stood there quietly, not looking at anyone, and thought, "They don't even know who I am, and they don't care, until someone makes them." The bell above the diner door chimed, soft but sharp in the silence that followed Ava's words. A man stepped inside. He wore dusty jeans, worn-out work boots, and a faded olive-green Marine Corps cap. His presence didn't demand attention, but it held it anyway. There was something about his walk. Straight-backed, calm, eyes that scanned the room like they were trained to. His name was Michael Harris, 42, white, and every movement he made spoke military. He glanced around the room once, then quietly slid into a booth near the window. No noise, no introduction, just observation. From across the diner, Ava saw him. Another customer. Nothing new. But Michael? He saw something else. He saw her posture. The way she stood straight even when humiliated. The way her steps were silent but precise. And then he saw the scars. Just a glimpse where her sleeve had slipped while she poured water for an elderly couple. Burns, bad ones, trailing from her wrist to her collarbone. He stared, not in disgust, but recognition. When she approached with the coffee pot, he straightened in his seat. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice distant, polite. "Yes, ma'am," he said, watching her closely. As she poured, her sleeve shifted again, just enough for him to catch sight of it. A faded tattoo. 3rd Infantry, 5th Division. His breath caught. The letters weren't sharp anymore, but to someone like Michael, someone who had served, they screamed louder than any voice in the room. Ava moved to the next table without noticing his expression. Michael sat frozen. He wasn't sure. Not yet. But a memory, one he had buried for years, was clawing its way back. Dust, blood, screaming, the sharp smell of burning metal, an IED Iraq. March 2006. Ramadi. A Humvee flipped. Bodies scattered. And one medic. A woman. Dark skin. Trembling voice steadying his chest wound with bare hands under fire. He never saw her face. Just her voice. And the tattoo. He'd always wondered if she made it. For 17 years, he carried that moment like a ghost. Now, that ghost was pouring coffee and being laughed at by men too stupid to know who stood before them. Ava returned to the counter, back turned, trying to disappear again. Michael stood up slowly and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said, low, careful. She turned, eyes guarded. He nodded toward her sleeve. "That tattoo. 3rd to 5th. Ramadi?" She froze. It was one thing to be mocked, one thing to be invisible. But this was something else. Something that made the breath in her chest stop moving. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Michael stepped closer. His voice cracked. "You told me I'd make it. March 15th. Iraq. You were the one who kept pressure on my chest until evac came." Ava blinked. Slowly. The hallway noise faded. Her hands dropped to her sides. Michael's voice softened, thick with awe. "Is it you?" She didn't answer right away. She just stared at him, this stranger with familiar pain in his eyes, until the room around them seemed to fall away. Then, without a word, Ava slowly pulled her sleeve up past her elbow. The full tattoo was there, faded, jagged, burned around the edges, but still intact. 3rd Infantry, 5th Division, Ramadi, 2006. Michael's mouth parted slightly. His hands trembled. "It is you," he whispered. "God, I never thought I'd see you again." By now, a few customers had started paying attention. The regulars at the counter looked up. The old woman near the window set down her spoon. Even the contractors paused their smirking as the energy in the room shifted. Michael's voice grew stronger, not loud, just steady. "You saved my life." Ava didn't respond. Her eyes were glassy, but her face held that same controlled stillness she wore every day, the same wall she built to survive. "You pulled me out of a burning Humvee," he said. "Shrapnel in my chest. I was bleeding out, and you kept your hands on me while bullets cracked overhead." One of the contractors scoffed, but no one laughed this time. Michael stepped back slightly, then raised his voice just enough to carry through the diner. "She's not just a waitress," he said. "She's a combat medic, a decorated combat medic. She saved 17 men during her 2 tours in Iraq. And she saved me." The room went silent. Real silent. Even the kitchen stopped clanging. The man who called her Frankenstein stared at his plate like it was made of ash. Ava blinked slowly, still processing, still trying to breathe in this moment she'd avoided for years. Michael looked directly at her. No pity in his expression, just something stronger, something deeper. "I never knew your name," he said. "I've thought about you every day since Ramadi, wondering if you made it out, hoping you were okay." Ava's voice finally emerged. Quiet, flat. "You're Michael Harris, Corporal. You kept asking about your squad, even while you were bleeding out." His lips trembled. "They all made it?" She nodded. All of them. The diner didn't move, didn't speak. They just listened. And then Michael did something no one expected. He reached up, removed his Marine Corps cap, and held it to his chest. "Sergeant Ava Brooks," he said loud enough for every single table to hear. "Thank you for my life." Gasps rippled through the room. The elderly couple stood up slowly. The woman placed a trembling hand over her heart. A young man near the back lowered his phone, his expression shattered. Even the manager stepped halfway out of the kitchen, his mouth slightly open, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Ava stood frozen. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted it, but now, every eye in the room that once looked through her finally saw her. And for the first time in a long, long while, they were silent not because of her scars, but because of her strength. The weight of the moment settled like thick smoke over the diner. Bob, the manager, finally emerged from the kitchen, his face flushed with embarrassment and something heavier, regret. "Sergeant Brooks," he said, voice steady but soft. "Take the rest of the day off. Paid." Ava blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. The room remained hushed. The contractor's earlier bravado evaporated. Bob continued. "And anyone who disrespects you in this place won't be welcome anymore. That's on me." The contractors shifted uncomfortably, their laughter gone cold. One of them swallowed hard. "We didn't know. We just—" Ava's gaze sliced through him. "Would it have mattered if I wasn't a veteran?" Her voice was low, but every word cut like glass. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Michael stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You don't owe anyone explanations. You've given more than enough." The room was quiet enough to hear a pin drop. The elderly couple returned to their seats, the woman wiping tears with a napkin. Ava slowly gathered her things, her sleeves falling away again, this time without trying to hide. The contractors muttered apologies, but Ava wasn't listening. She felt something she hadn't in years: respect. As she left the diner, she looked back once, catching the eyes of a few patrons who now saw her differently. Michael followed her to the door. "Not everyone deserves your silence," he said, "but you've earned their respect, and then some." Ava nodded, the weight of invisibility lifting just a little. Outside, the Texas sun shone brighter, and for the first time, Ava felt like she belonged. Weeks passed, and the story of Ava Brooks spread beyond the walls of the diner. Her photo hung on a new wall of honor near the entrance, a quiet testament to a hidden hero. Veterans from nearby towns began stopping by, sharing nods and stories that only those who served could understand. Children asked questions, eyes wide with curiosity instead of judgment. Ava found herself volunteering at the local VA clinic, using her medical training to help those who still struggled with their own battles. One morning, as the sun cast golden light over the parking lot, a young soldier in dress uniform walked through the diner door. He paused, spotting Ava. Without hesitation, he snapped to attention and gave her a crisp salute. Ava returned it, her hand steady for the first time in years. Her scars were no longer something to hide. They were badges of courage. As the diner hummed quietly around her, Ava smiled softly. She wasn't just serving coffee anymore. She was serving a reminder that behind every scar, there's a story worth honoring.